Hello, lovely sewing friends. I hope you're doing well. So, again, we're still in my studio, and that is for a very good reason, because I've got so many whales around me. I have so many whales. Look, okay, I want to show you all my whales. Look at my little stack of whales. I've not made a full one just yet, but they're getting there. They're getting there. What I would love to do, right, is show you, can you imagine? So anytime I start a new video, I'm wearing the garment and I have the finished whale next to me. I thought that'd be super, super cute. Anyway, in this video, because this video does have a purpose, believe it or not, I'm going to show you guys 5 quick and easy tips and tricks for sewing your first successful sewing project. Because when you start sewing, you only know what you know. And hopefully you'll find some little tips and tricks in this video to kind of upgrade your sewing skills. So whether you're a beginner or more advanced, you can just have a little couple of tidbits that will make your sewing time, however long or short it may be, a lot more enjoyable. So look at that, introduction done already, and we're under 1.5 minutes. Thank you. So the first one, the first one is going to be selecting the right pair of scissors. So I know it sounds counterintuitive, but this is something a lot of people get wrong with sewing scissors, because there are quite a lot. You need to pick the right pair for the right fabric, for the right pattern, for the right part of cutting out the fabric in the pattern. So for example, these are, I think, 12 inch from, no, that can't, well, it says 12 there. So I'm assuming that's 12 inch from there to there, but that doesn't look like a full foot long Subway sandwich. So anyway, these are 12 inch LDH scissors, and I would use these ones only on long straight pieces when I'm cutting out, right? Because when you're cutting out your pattern pieces in your fabric, once it's all pinned and it's all nice and it's all lovely, you basically want to make sure you've got the right scissors for the right parts. So these long blade scissors should really only be used for the long straight parts, because here you don't really want using that blade there with long cuts and long motions. You'll be able to cut out a lot more than if you were to use a smaller pair, obviously, because it's longer blade, longer cuts, but also it provides you with you won't have any little chinks in your fabric where you've opened and closed them too much along the long straight. So I tend to use these longer blades for the long straight. And then we are going to use these smaller ones here. These are 9 inch. So let's compare. Yeah, that looks about right. You can see that kind of like that. Yeah. So these are 9 inch blades. Okay, 2 reasons I love these ones. First of all, the reason all these scissors are out currently, except those long ones, which I had to go get from over there, because I was using them to cut out some fusing blocks. Whereas these ones are on hand because I've been using them to go around all of these curves here. So these are super, super useful for when you're doing curves like necklines and armholes. Really, really useful, because the shorter blade makes it a lot more easy to maneuver your hand. And also the shorter blade here allows you to kind of angle a little bit better. So I tend to use these ones when I'm doing curves or smaller sections, when you're kind of going in at different angles. These ones are quite heavy, so you wouldn't want to use these too much. These are kind of mate, you're on something here, you mean business. Whereas these are more your everyday constant working scissors. I also use these ones for when I'm cutting up the scrap fabric for stuffing my little whales. So these are a lot more comfortable to hold for longer periods of time than these ones, because I would say that these ones are at least at least, if not double, then definitely heavier. Anyway, those. Then, snips. I love these little ones. So snips, I would use snips when I'm cutting out my fabric just to do like the little notches, because the smaller blade, you can hold this in your hand and be completely fine, but the smaller blade, make sure that you don't go too far in to your seam allowance, because can you imagine trying to cut your notches with that? It'd be a bit stupid. So these little snips, and also it's got that little ring holder there, so you can kind of just go in and snip like that. So these for when you're doing your notches, and then also these for when you're clipping a seam. So I'm actually going to use these for when I'm clipping around the top of this whale, because he's gonna need a bunch of clipping around here so that it all lies nice and flat. So that will be really easy to get into. And also, these are really good for when you're just cutting off all those little thread tails. So try those ones out. Then the other ones I wanted to show you guys about, which will require a self-healing mat, which clearly I have out on my table now, but is these two rotary cutters, also LDH. So here I have like quite a big blade on that one compared to this one here. So again, like we had with our sewing scissors, I would use this one for more longer cuts, and then this one for like navigating the smaller, more maneuverable kind. But you can see here, it's got like a little grip there that you can just retract and expose the blade. So that's kind of like a nice safety feature. So yeah, I use those two for when I'm cutting out bigger chunks, because you have to use it with the self-healing mat, and you can only cut whatever is on the board, because you can't go off the board, because otherwise you'll damage the surface you're on. So I don't tend to use rotary cutters that much, because I'm either using this one for the long parts and then this one for the everyday, but they are there if you need them. So water break. So the next part is for having a good sewing project is selecting the right thread, right? So I've said it once and I'll say it again, I'm a Gutermann ride or die. I have always used Gutermann, I will forever use Gutermann, and there is a reason for that. I will show you right now. So you can see here, actually, I've got a little pegboard of all my threads. Those are all Gutermann, by the way. And then I've got more Gutermann down there. And then if we come on over here, I'm going to take you to a little thread drawer. So those are all Gutermann as well, right? So the reason that I use Gutermann, number one, like they're just the best quality I have found, because I tend to use the polyester ones. So you can see here, that's the polyester one there. So this is a 250 meter, and I just use them all the time, and they're just super durable, right? Took some pulling, that did. So I tend to use the polyester type because that is the best one for my sewing projects compared to this one here. I put it on a Gutermann reel, but it's another one. But that's a cotton, and that broke very easily. I put it on here because I was using it for overlocking, but it's from an overlocking cone, just so you guys can see the contrast in strength. So I tend to predominantly use Gutermann polyester. However, I have been sent a whole bunch of Gutermann range of threads that I am going to test out for other little projects. So that's another one. So polyester for your everyday kind of sewing project, do not use cheap thread. Don't do it. I'll find out and I will be annoyed for you, because the problem with cheap thread, you will find out very soon that it breaks so easily on your sewing machine. So, because if you look at your sewing machine, right? Oh, she's got muscles. All of these bits here that your thread has to go through, right? it's just not going to work. Like, there's too much tension and too much friction for a cheap thread to survive that. And so what ends up happening with a lot of beginners when they come to do sewing for the first time with a cheap thread is that it doesn't turn out well. Either the thread gets tangled, or the thread keeps on snapping, or a whole bunch of bird nesting underneath the presser foot. But that's because of the thread that they've chosen. So just get good quality thread, and don't be afraid of the price of it, because yeah, it might be like $4.50, $5 Australian dollars to me, but it's so worth it. There is, like, it's the price of a coffee. Like, just get the damn Gutermann is all I'm gonna say on that. Now, the third, now we're on the third, aren't we? See, I need to come back over here because I have a little post-it note of all my points I wanted to make during this video. So look at me, we're growing, we're learning, we're sewing. So the next one is you've got to load up your bobbin as much as possible before starting your sewing project. There is nothing more frustrating than getting to the last few seams of your sewing project and then having your bobbin run out. Do not let that happen. Do not let you be the one that does that. So what I do, and as you can see, I use these. I use all of these. So what I do before I start a sewing project, I load up 1, if not 2 bobbins if I know I'm going to need 2 bobbins. The standard sewing projects tends to only takes less than 100 meters of thread. So you can load up like 1.5 bobbins if you need to. However, I tend to buy myself a whole bunch of bobbins and just stick them in this bobbin case here. And then every time I start a new sewing project, I just grab out one of these bobbins, these empty clear bobbins, and use it for my sewing project. And then what I do, I am so smart, you are so welcome. I'm gonna get this one here. Now, this is a metal bobbin, but ignore that, it's fine. And then I pair the bobbin and the thread like this together, and I hang it up just over there. So I know that whenever I need a certain thread, I know exactly where the bobbin is to correspond to it. That is the smartest thing I've ever done, and I'm so proud of myself thinking about this and organizing my sewing space to accommodate for this. So another thing with thread, if you are doing something like gathering, use up your old thread first. Do not, I need to calm myself down before I say this. Do not use your final beautiful thread on gathering. Use up your scrap thread, like this piece here. If you're just doing a little bit of gathering, you can just use up your old scrappy bits of thread. Do not use the final thread on your gathering, because first of all, you don't want to waste up a lot of your final thread on your gathering that you're going to have to take out the gathering threads. Instead, use up your old pieces of thread, because you're not going to start a sewing project with this. Also, like, it's still good quality thread because it's still Gutermann. So use up corresponding contrasting thread, because it's so much more easier to remove the basting stitches as well. So that is really, really helpful to use up your old thread as well, because girl, I have so much thread, I do not know what to do with that. I also, and of course I picked out this one, but you can definitely see the difference in color tone between these two threads, right? They're not identical. The bobbin and the thread spool are not the same color, and that is because what would have happened is I would have either lost or used up the original bobbin that goes with this thread color, and I found a very similar color from like a low-ish bobbin thread spool, and I just wound it on, and you cannot tell the difference. I had to point it out to you, so just to do that to save up thread and whatnot. And that really helps me with my thread, but also not wasting thread. because at the end of the day, it is polyester. I don't want to use it excessively. I want to use it with intention. So Gutermann thread, get lots of it, essentially. The next one I want to talk about is sewing one technique at a time. It is very easy to, cut everything out and then jump straight into different parts of it when that gets very overwhelming very quickly. So what I would suggest is to firstly cut out everything, put it to one side. Try not to move your fabric pieces once they've cut out because they can shift. Anyway, so once everything's cut out, put it into like sections. So this is the parts that I need to do for gathering. So you've got all of your gathering stuff together, and then you can do all your gathering together, and so that you're not like accidentally changing up the thread machine tension and thread and spools and everything and getting overwhelmed when you're swapping in between things. Just have it all in one pile and do it all at once. So do that all at once. And then things more technical like a fly front or belt loops or something like that take a lot of like mental energy to read the pattern, to know what you're doing, and flip to right, inside out, all that kind of stuff. Put that all to one side so that when you come to do that, you can have the space and the time to do it correctly. Because there's nothing more frustrating than like accidentally putting in an invisible zip upside down. You just don't want to do that. So put things into their corresponding piles, and you can sew them when you can. It's not like you have to sew this unless you're on a time limit, of course. It's not like you have to sew all in one go. You can just do bit by bit, and that makes the process so much more enjoyable. So yeah, what I tend to do when I cut out a pattern, well in this case multiple patterns for my whales, I do all the cutting and all the fusing at once. And then I can go and sit down at my sewing machine at night and just do all the straight bits, do all the curves of the back together, and then do all the fins and do all the flippers together. And I've actually been sitting on my couch at night just doing all the eyes, which is really beautiful hand embroidery. So that makes it really, really enjoyable for me. So that adds to my sewing process, that I don't feel overwhelmed or rushed to do any part of my sewing. So there, let me have a drink. Then the last part, iron that seam. Iron your seams, iron your seams, iron your seams. And it's not the most enjoyable part, I must admit, because you once you're on a roll, you're on a roll. But ironing and pressing your seams is one of the most critical points of sewing your own clothes, because it not only looks nice, but it also sets the seam correctly. And also, if you're sewing side seams, for example, and you're stacking them up, the pressing of them allows everything to lie so much more neatly together. It also makes it all lie nice and flat, so there's not excess bulk. Also, it sets the seam as to how it's supposed to lie. So if it's supposed to be an open seam or a closed seam or a French seam or a curved seam, edge stitching on a facing is the most revolutionary thing I've ever seen in my entire life. It makes such the world of difference. And it honestly cannot be beaten except for pressing. So an edge stitch is when you kind of stitch around a neckline and it lies nice and flat on the inside. So that is so critical to be pressed. There are some sewing techniques that you need to press, and that makes your sewing jump up a whole new level. So what I would suggest, there's not any major, pressing secrets you need to know about. But the one thing I would say, when you're pressing and ironing, just take the extra couple of minutes to kind of think about how you're ironing and how you're pressing it, because also ironing means sweeping the iron back and forth. Pressing means you know, pressing it there, pressing it there, pressing it there, like kind of stamping the fabric. And so that when you sew, everything is correct. And so that by that I mean, like, you know, everything lies the way it should. Because also you'll notice, like, when I started to learn how to sew, I just kind of put seams either side, whereas now I know that, like, shoulder seams go to the back. You know, everything on the torso should point towards the center back, and everything on the waist should point towards, like, center front, you know, all that kind of stuff. So also when you're pressing darts, it's quite critical. So yeah, those are my 5 top tips for a successful sewing project. I hope you guys enjoyed that, and if you did, make sure to subscribe, and hopefully next time I will have a finished wale for you, but I promise nothing because I enjoy sewing and I will do it in my own time. So this is one of the fins I've got so far. Look at that. So this fabric here, I originally got like 4 or 5 years ago. I made my dad an apron for Father's Day or Christmas one year, and then I made myself a pair of pants out of it, and then I used this fabric here, which is a Liberty, no surprises there, for the pocket lining. So that's going to be a wale, and I just want to make so many things at the moment. I'm like really enjoying sewing, and that's about it. So I hope you guys have a lovely week, and I'll see you next week with some wales soon. Bye.